gunshot echoed across the desert just as Sarah Mitchell finished hanging the last of her laundry, and she knew before she even turned around that something terrible had happened. She dropped the wet sheet back into the basket and ran toward the sound, her boots kicking up clouds of dust on the hard-packed earth outside her small ranch house in the Arizona Territory. It was 1882, and gunshots were not uncommon in this wild land, but something about this one made her heart race with urgency. As she crested the small rise behind her property, she saw him, a lone cowboy stumbling toward her, leading a magnificent black stallion that was bleeding profusely from its flank. The horse's legs buckled, and it went down hard. The cowboy went down with it, his hand still gripping the reins as if letting go would mean losing the animal forever. Sarah ran faster, her long dark braid bouncing against her back, her skirts gathered in her fists. When she reached them, she could see the desperation in the cowboy's face. He was young, maybe 25, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a stormy sky. Blood covered his hands, though she could not tell yet if it was all from the horse. "Please," he said, his voice rough and breaking. "Please help him. His name is Thunder. He is all I have left in this world." Sarah dropped to her knees beside the fallen stallion, her hands already moving over the animal's body, assessing the damage. The bullet had torn through the horse's hind quarter, missing the major arteries by what looked like less than an inch. Blood poured from the wound, soaking into the dry earth. The horse's breathing came in labored gasps, its eyes rolling with pain and fear. "Help me get him to my barn," Sarah commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Now, or he will bleed out right here." The cowboy staggered to his feet, and together they somehow managed to get the massive animal upright. Thunder whinnied in agony, but he moved step by agonizing step toward the weathered barn that stood behind Sarah's house. It took them nearly 20 minutes to cover the 100 yards, and by the time they got the stallion into an empty stall, Sarah's dress was soaked with blood and sweat. "What is your name?" she asked, as she grabbed clean cloths and her medical supplies from the cabinet she kept stocked for just such emergencies. Living alone on a ranch meant being prepared for anything. "Cole Harrison," he said, never taking his eyes off his horse. "We were riding through when claim jumpers opened fire. They wanted Thunder. He is worth more than most men make in 5 years. I would not let them take him." Sarah pressed a thick pad of cloth against the wound, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. Thunder's breathing was shallow now, his strength fading. "Hold this," she told Cole, guiding his hands to replace hers, or press hard, do not let up even for a second. She worked quickly, building a fire in the small stove she kept in the barn for cold nights. She heated water and prepared her instruments, her movements efficient and sure. Her father had been a veterinarian before he died 3 years ago, and he had taught her everything he knew. She had been caring for animals her whole life, and she had saved more than she had lost. But this was going to be close. "Talk to him," Sarah said as she returned with steaming water and clean instruments. "Let him hear your voice. Let him know you are here." Cole leaned close to Thunder's head, his hand stroking the horse's neck. "You stay with me, boy," he whispered, and Sarah heard the tears in his voice. "You have carried me through deserts and storms. You have been my friend when I had no others. You do not get to leave me now. You hear me? You stay." Sarah removed the cloth and examined the wound more closely. The bullet was still inside, lodged against the bone. She would have to remove it, and quickly, before infection set in. "This is going to hurt him," she warned. "Hold his head. Do not let him thrash." What followed was the longest hour of Sarah's life. She worked by lamplight as the sun began to set, her fingers steady as she probed the wound, searching for the bullet. Thunder screamed and thrashed despite Cole's best efforts to calm him. Blood flowed freely, and twice Sarah thought she had lost him, but each time the stallion's strong heart kept beating. Finally, her forceps closed around the bullet, and she pulled it free. The relief that flooded through her was almost dizzying. She cleaned the wound thoroughly, packed it with herbs that would fight infection, and stitched it closed with careful, precise sutures. By the time she finished, full night had fallen, and both she and Cole were exhausted. Thunder lay quiet now, his breathing more regular, though still weak. Cole sat beside his horse's head, one hand resting on the stallion's neck. His face was pale, and Sarah noticed for the first time that he was trembling. "He will live," she said softly, "but it will be a long recovery, weeks, maybe months before he can be ridden again." Cole's shoulders sagged with relief, and he bowed his head. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Sarah stood and stretched her aching back. Her hands were cramping from the delicate work, and her knees hurt from kneeling on the hard barn floor. "You should come inside," she said. "I will make coffee and something to eat. There's nothing more we can do for him tonight except let him rest." Cole shook his head. "I will stay with him." "You will be no good to him if you collapse from exhaustion," Sarah said firmly. "Come inside for an hour. We can see him from the kitchen window. If anything changes, we will know." Reluctantly, Cole followed her out of the barn and into her small house. It was simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and handmade furniture. Sarah lit the lamps and started a fire in the stove, then put coffee on to boil. She sliced bread and cheese and set it on the table, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. Cole sat heavily in one of the chairs, and now that they were in the light, Sarah could see him properly for the first time. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the kind of strength that came from hard work rather than natural bulk. His dark hair was long enough to brush his collar, and his face, despite its youth, had the weathered look of someone who spent most of his time outdoors. There was a scar on his left cheek, thin and white, and his hands, now that she looked at them, were covered in small scars and calluses. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were gray, the color of a gathering storm, and they held a depth of sadness that made her chest tighten. "You are hurt," Sarah said suddenly, noticing the way he held his left arm close to his body. Cole glanced down as if surprised to find that he was indeed injured. "It is nothing, just a graze." "Let me see," Sarah said, moving closer. He hesitated, then slowly removed his jacket. His shirt sleeve was torn and soaked with blood. Sarah carefully cut away the fabric, revealing a deep gash along his upper arm. It was not life-threatening, but it needed attention. "This needs stitches too," she said, already gathering her supplies again. "You have done enough," Cole protested weakly. "Sit still," Sarah ordered, her tone brooking no argument. She cleaned the wound, noting how he barely flinched despite what must have been considerable pain. "You are lucky. A few inches to the right and it would have shattered the bone." As she worked, she felt his eyes on her face. "You are very skilled," he said quietly. "Where did you learn?" "My father was a veterinarian. He taught me everything. After he died, I took over caring for the animals in this area. People bring me their sick horses, their injured cattle. I do what I can." "You live here alone?" Sarah nodded, concentrating on making small, neat stitches. "For 3 years now. My mother died when I was young, and my father raised me by himself. When he passed, I kept the ranch. It is not much, but it is mine." "It must be hard. A woman alone out here." She looked up at him sharply. "I managed just fine." Cole held up his good hand in a gesture of peace. "I meant no offense. I only meant that it takes courage." Sarah tied off the last stitch and wrapped his arm in clean bandages. "There. Keep it clean and dry. Change the bandages daily. If you see any red streaks or feel fever, it means infection. Come back immediately if that happens." "I cannot pay you," Cole said, and she heard the shame in his voice. "The claim jumpers took everything except Thunder. I have nothing left." Sarah stood and walked to the stove, pouring 2 cups of strong coffee. "I did not ask for payment. Everyone needs payment. I need good people in this world more than I need money. Sarah said, handing him a cup. You clearly love that horse. That tells me something about you. They drank their coffee in silence for a moment, and Sarah found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. There was something about him that drew her, something beyond his obvious physical appeal. Maybe it was the way he had begged her to save his horse, or the tears she had heard in his voice, or the gentle way his hands had stroked Thunder's neck. In her experience, a man who could love an animal that deeply was a man who could truly love. Where were you heading? She asked. Cole stared into his coffee cup. Nowhere in particular. I have been drifting for the past 2 years, taking work where I can find it, ranch hand mostly, sometimes driving cattle. After my family died, I could not stay in Texas. Too many memories. What happened to them? Cholera. It swept through our town like wildfire. Took my parents, my 2 younger sisters, and my fiancé. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Sarah could hear the pain underneath. I was away, driving cattle to market. By the time I got back, they were already buried. Sarah's heart ached for him. I am sorry. It was 2 years ago. I should be over it by now. Grief does not work that way, Sarah said softly. It takes as long as it takes. Cole looked up at her, and something passed between them, a moment of understanding, of shared loss. They were both alone in the world, both carrying wounds that had not fully healed. They checked on Thunder twice more that night. Each time the stallion seemed a little stronger, his breathing a little easier. Sarah showed Cole how to check for fever, how to change the bandages, how to encourage the horse to drink water. Cole learned quickly, his hands surprisingly gentle for their size. You can sleep in the spare room, Sarah offered as midnight approached. It is not much, just a bed and a chair, but it is better than the barn. Cole shook his head. I should stay with Thunder. I will wake you if anything changes, Sarah promised, but you need rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. Finally, exhausted beyond argument, Cole agreed. Sarah showed him to the small room that had once been her father's study. There was a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. It was sparse, but it was clean. Thank you, Cole said, standing in the doorway. For everything. You saved his life. We saved his life, Sarah corrected. Now get some sleep. She watched him close the door, then walked through the quiet house, checking the locks and banking the fires. Through the kitchen window, she could see the barn, dark and silent. She sent up a silent prayer that Thunder would make it through the night. Sarah woke before dawn, as she always did, and immediately went to check on the stallion. To her relief and joy, Thunder was standing, though he kept most of his weight off his injured leg. His eyes were brighter, more alert, and when he saw her, he nickered softly. Good morning to you too, Sarah said, running her hand along his neck. You are a fighter, are you not? She changed his bandages, pleased to see that the wound looked clean with no signs of infection. She mixed a warm mash of oats and herbs that would help with healing and was gratified when Thunder ate half of it. By the time she finished, the sun was rising, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and pink. Cole appeared in the barn doorway, his hair damp as if he had just washed. How is he? See for yourself, Sarah said, smiling. The look on Cole's face when he saw Thunder standing was something Sarah knew she would remember for the rest of her life. Pure joy, unguarded, and beautiful. He walked slowly to his horse, placed his forehead against Thunder's, and just stood there for a long moment. Thank you, he whispered to the horse. Thank you for staying. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Cole insisted on working to earn his keep despite his injured arm. Sarah protested at first, but she had to admit that having help around the ranch was welcome. He mended fences, repaired the leaking roof on the barn, and helped her care for the various animals people brought her. He was good with his hands, patient and thorough, and he seemed to genuinely enjoy the work. Sarah found herself looking forward to their morning coffee, to the conversations they had while working side by side, to the comfortable silences that fell between them. Thunder improved steadily. Within a week, he was moving around the stall, and within 2, he was walking in the small paddock Sarah used for recovering animals. Cole spent hours with him each day, brushing his coat until it gleamed, talking to him in that low, gentle voice. Sarah often watched them together, seeing the deep bond between man and horse. It touched something in her, something she had thought long dead. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself that she preferred it that way, but now, with Cole here, she realized how much she had been missing. It was dangerous, she knew, to let herself feel this way. Cole would leave as soon as Thunder was well enough to ride. He had said as much himself. He was a drifter, a man running from ghosts, and Sarah was just a stopping point on his journey to nowhere. But her heart did not seem to care about logic. One evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset, Cole told her about growing up in Texas, about his dreams of having his own ranch someday, about the family he had lost. Rachel was beautiful, he said, speaking of his late fiancée for the first time. Dark hair, dark eyes, always laughing. We were going to be married in the fall. Her mother was making her dress. He paused, his jaw tight. I used to think about her every day, every hour. But lately I realize whole days go by when I do not think of her at all. It feels like betrayal. Sarah reached over and took his hand. It is not betrayal, it is healing. She would want you to heal, to live. Would she? Cole's voice was bitter. I was not there when she needed me. I was not there for any of them. You could not have known. You could not have stopped it. Maybe not. But I could have been there. I could have held her hand when she died. I could have told her I loved her one last time. Sarah squeezed his hand. You are being too hard on yourself. Grief makes us think we could have changed things that were never in our control. Cole turned to look at her, and in the fading light, his eyes were vulnerable in a way she had never seen. How did you become so wise? I am not wise. I have just learned that life is too short and too hard to spend it torturing ourselves over what we cannot change. They sat in silence for a while, hands still linked, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Sarah knew she should pull her hand away, should maintain some kind of proper distance, but she could not bring herself to do it. His hand was warm and strong, and having it wrapped around hers felt right in a way that defied explanation. I should leave soon, Cole said quietly. Thunder is almost healed. I have imposed on your hospitality long enough. Sarah's heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. Where will you go? I do not know. North, maybe. I heard there is work in Montana. Montana is a long way away. Everywhere is a long way away when you have nowhere to go. Sarah wanted to tell him to stay, wanted to beg him not to leave, but pride kept her silent. She would not throw herself at a man who did not want her. If he wanted to go, she would let him go with dignity, but she would miss him. God, how she would miss him. The next day, Sarah rode into town for supplies. It was a small settlement, barely big enough to be called a town, with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of houses. She had lived near it all her life and knew everyone who lived there. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store with her husband, noticed immediately that something was different. You have a glow about you, Sarah Mitchell, she said, with a knowing smile as she measured out flour and sugar. Would not have anything to do with that handsome cowboy staying at your place, would it? Sarah felt her cheeks heat. He is just a drifter I helped. His horse was injured. Mm-hmm, Mrs. Henderson said, clearly not believing a word of it. And I suppose you have been staring at his horse all starry-eyed for the past 3 weeks? I have not been starry-eyed, Sarah protested. Honey, half the unmarried women in this town have been throwing themselves at you for years, and you have never given any of them a second glance. Now this cowboy shows up, and suddenly you are walking around like you are floating on air. If that is not starry-eyed, I do not know what is. Sarah sighed. There was no point in arguing with Mrs. Henderson. The woman had known her since she was in diapers. It does not matter anyway. He is leaving soon. Have you told him you do not want him to leave? Of course not. Why not? Because I have my pride, Mrs. Henderson. If he wants to leave, I'm not going to beg him to stay. The older woman shook her head. Pride is cold comfort on a winter night, Sarah. If you care about this man, tell him. The worst that can happen is he leaves anyway, which is what you think is going to happen regardless. Sarah loaded her supplies into the wagon, Mrs. Henderson's words echoing in her mind. Maybe she was right. Maybe Sarah should tell Cole how she felt, but the thought of putting herself out there, of risking rejection, terrified her. When she got back to the ranch, she found Cole in the paddock with Thunder. The stallion was trotting in a wide circle, showing off for his master. The limp was almost completely gone, and his coat shone with health. He looks wonderful, Sarah said, leaning against the fence. Cole smiled, and it transformed his face. He is almost back to his old self. Another week or two, and he'll be ready to ride. Another week or two. Such a short time. Sarah felt something inside her crack. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Cole leaving, about going back to her solitary life. The house had never felt emptier than it did right now, knowing that soon it would be empty again. She heard footsteps in the hall and sat up. Through her window, she saw a light come on in the barn. Cole must be checking on Thunder. Sarah threw a shawl over her nightgown and slipped outside. Cole was in Thunder's stall, running his hands over the horse's injured leg, checking it the way Sarah had taught him. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "I could not sleep," Sarah said. "I saw the light and thought I would check on you both." Cole stood, brushing straw from his pants. "Thunder is doing well. I think he barely feels the injury anymore." "That is good. That is what we wanted." They stood there in the soft lamplight, not quite looking at each other. The air between them felt heavy, charged with all the things they were not saying. "Sarah," Cole said finally, and her name on his lips sent shivers down her spine. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I do not want to leave." Sarah's heart stopped. "What?" "I do not want to leave," Cole repeated. And now he was looking at her, really looking at her. "These past few weeks with you, they have been the happiest I have had since before my family died. I wake up every morning looking forward to the day. I go to sleep every night grateful for where I am, and it is because of you." "Cole? I know I have no right to say this," he continued, the words tumbling out now as if he had been holding them back for too long. "I know I have nothing to offer you. I have no money, no property, no prospects. I am just a drifter with a horse and a saddle, but I am asking anyway, because I cannot leave without telling you how I feel." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "How do you feel?" Cole closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to cup her face. "I am falling in love with you, Sarah Mitchell. Actually, I think I already fell. I think I started falling the moment I saw you running toward me with your skirts in your fists, ready to save a dying horse for a stranger. I love your strength, your kindness, your courage. I love the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating. I love how you talk to the animals like they can understand every word. I love everything about you, and the thought of leaving makes me feel like I am dying inside." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "I do not want you to leave either. I have been so scared to tell you, scared that you would not feel the same way, that you were still in love with the woman you lost. I will always love Rachel," Cole said honestly, "but she is gone, and I am still here. And you, Sarah, you have brought me back to life. You have made me want to stop running, to stop hiding from the future. I want to build something with you. I want to stay here, to help you with the ranch, to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life, if you will have me." Sarah laughed through her tears. "If I will have you? Cole, I have been in love with you for weeks. I have been trying so hard not to be, but I cannot help it. You are everything I never knew I wanted." Cole kissed her then, his lips soft and gentle against hers. It was a kiss full of promise, full of hope, full of all the tomorrows they would have together. Sarah melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time in 3 years she did not feel alone. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I have one more thing to ask you." "What is it?" "When I was in Thunder's stall earlier, I was not just checking his leg. I was working up the courage to come to you." He paused, then said, "Sarah, I am still wounded. Not in my arm, but in my heart. I have scars that run deep, and I'm afraid they might never fully heal. But if you would have me, I am asking you to heal me too. The way you healed Thunder, with patience, with kindness, with love. Can you do that? Can you take on a broken man and help him find his way back to himself?" Sarah felt fresh tears spill down her cheeks. "Oh, Cole, I am broken too. We all are, in one way or another. But maybe two broken people can heal each other. Maybe we can be whole together. Is that a yes?" "It is a yes to everything. Yes, I will have you. Yes, I will love you. Yes, we will heal each other. Yes to all of it." Cole swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing, and Thunder nickered from his stall as if he approved. They stood there in the barn, holding each other, and Sarah thought about how strange life was. A few weeks ago, she had been alone, resigned to spending the rest of her life that way. Now she was in the arms of a man she loved, planning a future she had never dared to dream of. The next morning they rode into town together. Cole wanted to speak to the pastor about getting married, and Sarah wanted to introduce him properly to the people who had known her all her life. Mrs. Henderson took one look at their joined hands and their radiant faces and declared that she had known it all along. The wedding took place a month later in the small church. Sarah wore her mother's dress, carefully preserved all these years, and Cole wore his best clothes, brushed clean and pressed. Thunder, now fully healed and more magnificent than ever, stood outside the church, decorated with ribbons. The whole town came to the wedding. These frontier communities understood the importance of celebrating joy when it came, and there was plenty of joy to celebrate. Sarah and Cole stood before God and their neighbors and promised to love, honor, and cherish each other for all their days. The wedding night was tender and sweet. Cole carried Sarah over the threshold of what was now their home, and they made love slowly, learning each other's bodies, whispering promises against each other's skin. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Sarah thought about how right Mrs. Henderson had been. Pride would have been cold comfort indeed compared to being held by the man she loved. Life settled into a new rhythm. Cole proved to be everything Sarah could have hoped for in a partner. He worked tirelessly on the ranch, expanding the barn, building new paddocks, helping Sarah with the steady stream of injured and sick animals that came their way. His patience and skill with horses became well known, and soon people were bringing their animals from miles around. They made a good team. Sarah's medical knowledge combined with Cole's natural way with animals made them the best in the territory at what they did. The ranch began to thrive, growing from Sarah's small operation into something more substantial. But it was not just the work that made Sarah happy. It was the little things. Morning coffee shared on the porch, watching the sunrise together, Cole's arms around her at night, the sound of his laughter filling the house that had been silent for so long, the way he kissed her goodbye before heading out to the fields, the way he kissed her hello when he came back. Cole healed slowly, just as Sarah had known he would. There were still days when the shadows crept in, when she would find him staring at nothing, lost in memories of what he had lost. But each time it happened, Sarah was there pulling him back, reminding him that he was alive, that he was loved, that he had a future worth living for. And gradually the shadows came less frequently. The nightmares that had plagued him faded. The guilt that had weighed him down began to lift. He was healing just as Thunder had healed, with patience and love and time. A year after their wedding, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole over breakfast, watching his face carefully, afraid he might be scared or overwhelmed. Instead, his face lit up with pure joy. "A baby?" he said, his voice full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby?" "We are," Sarah confirmed, laughing at his excitement. Cole jumped up from the table, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her thoroughly. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you so much. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything." The pregnancy was not easy. Sarah continued to work as much as she could, but as she grew larger, even simple tasks became difficult. Cole fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest, bringing her meals in bed, taking over all her animal care duties. Sarah protested at first, but secretly she loved being taken care of. Their son was born on a warm spring evening in 1884. The labor was long and difficult, but when Sarah finally held her baby in her arms, all the pain was forgotten. He was perfect, with dark hair like his mother and gray eyes like his father. They named him Matthew, after Cole's father. Cole cried when he held his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face unchecked. "Hello, Matthew," he whispered. "I am your papa. I promise I will always be here for you. I promise I will love you and your mama for the rest of my life." Sarah watched her husband cradle their newborn son and felt her heart overflow with love. This was what healing looked like. This was what hope looked like. A broken man, a lonely woman, and a wounded horse, all of them given a second chance at happiness. Matthew was a healthy, happy baby who grew into a curious, energetic toddler. He loved the animals as much as his parents did, and by the time he was 2, he was already trying to help with the feeding and care. Thunder, patient and gentle, let the little boy climb all over him, seeming to understand that this tiny human was precious. 2 years after Matthew was born, Sarah gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Grace. Cole joked that his family was expanding as fast as the ranch, and indeed both were thriving. They had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the increased workload, and Cole had just purchased the adjoining property, doubling their land. The years passed in a blur of happiness. There were hard times, certainly, droughts that tested their resources, sickness that swept through the livestock, the constant challenges of frontier life. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. Matthew grew into a tall, strong young man who loved horses as much as his father. Emma became skilled in healing animals, following in her mother's footsteps. Grace, the most adventurous of the 3, talked of becoming a teacher and bringing education to the frontier communities. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Sarah and Cole sat on the porch where they had first confessed their love to each other. Their children were grown now. Matthew married with a baby of his own on the way. Emma courting a nice young veterinarian from Santa Fe. Grace away at a teacher's college in California. "Can you believe it has been 20 years?" Sarah asked, leaning against Cole's shoulder. "Some days it feels like yesterday," Cole said, wrapping his arm around her. "Other days it feels like we have always been together." Thunder, now an old horse but still magnificent, stood in the paddock watching them. He was retired from riding, spending his days grazing peacefully and letting Matthew's young children brush his coat. "I never thought I would be this happy," Cole said quietly. "After I lost my first family, I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days running from ghosts." "What changed?" Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. "You," Cole said simply. "You healed me, just like you healed Thunder. You gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home, a family, a life worth living." Sarah turned to kiss him, and even after 20 years, his kiss still made her heart race. "You healed me too," she said. "I did not even realize how lonely I was until you showed up with your wounded horse and your wounded heart." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, their home, their life together. Sarah thought about that day so long ago when she had heard a gunshot and run toward it. She could never have imagined then where that moment would lead, could never have dreamed that a dying horse and a desperate cowboy would become her entire world. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Staying here, giving up the wandering life?" Cole looked at her as if she had said something crazy. "Regret? Sarah, you are my whole heart. This ranch, our children, the life we have built together, it is everything I never knew I needed. I have not regretted a single day." "Good," Sarah said, settling back against him, "because I have loved every single day with you." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cole started to sing, his voice low and rough but sweet. It was a song about the frontier, about finding love in unexpected places, about building a life from nothing but hope and hard work. Sarah closed her eyes and listened, feeling the rumble of his voice through his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him against her, feeling grateful beyond measure for this life they had created together. Thunder whinnied softly from the paddock, and Sarah smiled. That horse had brought them together, had been the catalyst for everything that followed. He had lived a long, good life, pampered and loved, never having to work hard again after that day the claim jumpers shot him. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the horse, though he could not hear her. "Thank you for bringing him to me." The next morning Sarah woke to find Cole already up, standing at the window looking out at the ranch. She went to him, wrapping her arms around him from behind, and he covered her hands with his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just how blessed I am," Cole said. "How far we have come, how much we have built together." Sarah rested her cheek against his back. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," Cole agreed. He turned in her arms, looking down at her with eyes that still made her stomach flip even after all these years. "I love you, Sarah Harrison. I loved you the first time I saw you running toward me. I loved you when you saved Thunder's life. I loved you when you agreed to heal my broken heart. And I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Sarah said, tears forming in her eyes. "Always." They spent that day together, just the two of them, riding out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a hilltop that overlooked the valley. They had a picnic lunch and talked about their children, their grandchildren, their hopes for the future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Cole pulled Sarah into his arms, and they danced, slowly swaying to music only they could hear. "Do you remember what I asked you that night in the barn?" Cole said as they danced. "When I asked you to heal me too?" "I remember," Sarah said. "You were afraid your wounds would never fully heal." "You did heal me," Cole said, his voice thick with emotion. "Completely. Totally. You took a broken man and made him whole again. You gave me a reason to live, to love, to hope. You gave me everything." Sarah pulled back to look at him. This man who had stumbled into her life with a dying horse and a heart full of grief. This man who had become her entire world. "You gave me everything too. You filled my empty house with love and laughter. You gave me children and grandchildren. You gave me a partnership, a real partnership, where we work together and dream together and face everything side by side." "We have been a good team," Cole agreed. "The best team," Sarah corrected, and kissed him as the sun set behind them. Thunder lived for another 2 years after that, passing peacefully in his sleep at the age of 30. Cole and Sarah buried him on that hilltop where they had danced, with a simple marker that read, "Thunder, beloved friend who brought two hearts together." Matthew carved a small horse into the wooden marker, and the whole family came to pay their respects to the stallion who had started it all. Cole grieved for his horse, but it was a clean grief, without the guilt and shadows that had haunted him for so long. Thunder had lived a long, happy life, pampered and loved, and he had died peacefully. It was all anyone could ask for. Life continued. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch operations as Cole and Sarah aged. Emma opened her own veterinary practice, carrying on her mother's legacy. Grace became a beloved teacher, eventually returning to Arizona to establish the first school in their growing community. Sarah and Cole grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces lined with wrinkles, their bodies not as strong as they once were, but their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepening into something rich and unshakable. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and now great-grandchildren, Cole stood up to make a toast. 40 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his age, I rode into this territory with nothing but a wounded horse and a broken heart. I thought my life was over. I thought I had nothing left to live for, and then I met a woman who saved my horse and saved me too. Sarah, you have been my whole world for 40 years. You have been my partner, my lover, my best friend. You have given me more happiness than any man deserves. I thank God every day that those claim jumpers shot thunder, because it brought me to you. Everyone laughed through their tears, raising their glasses to toast Sarah and Cole, to love that endured, to second chances, to healing. Sarah stood up beside her husband, taking his hand. Cole Harrison came into my life like a storm, she said, unexpected and impossible to ignore. He filled my lonely house with love. He gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up each morning with joy in my heart. They say that time heals all wounds, but I do not think that is true. I think love heals all wounds. Cole's love healed my loneliness. My love healed his grief. Together we healed each other, and we built something beautiful. That night, after all the guests had gone home, Cole and Sarah lay in their bed, holding each other in the darkness. No regrets? Sarah whispered. Not a single one, Cole said, kissing her forehead. You? Only that we did not have more time, Sarah said. I want 100 more years with you. Then I will live forever, Cole promised, making her laugh. I love you, Sarah said. I love you too, Cole replied, always and forever. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, their hearts beating in sync, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together that was richer and fuller than either had ever dreamed possible. Years later, when Sarah finally passed away peacefully at the age of 89, Cole was holding her hand, whispering his love for her until her last breath. He followed her 6 months later, dying in his sleep in the house they had shared for so many years. Their children buried them together on that hilltop next to Thunder, 3 simple markers side by side. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, each one knowing the story of how it all began. The story of a cowboy who watched a brave woman nurse his wounded stallion back from death and then asked her to heal him too. The story of 2 broken people who found each other and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from the most unexpected places. And if you visit that hilltop even now, on quiet evenings when the sun is setting and the desert air is cool, some say you can still feel them there. A cowboy and his wife dancing to music only they can hear, celebrating a love that transcends time, a love that healed them both, a love that truly lasted forever.